Parajita, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please share the PPT. So before that, we talked about communication previously. I took a guest lecture for you guys, if you remember. So we talked about two classifications of communication. The first classification of communication, which is based on the number of participants. The second classification of communication, which is based on the mode of communication, the means through which the message is disseminated. So according to the first classification, you have intrapersonal communication where only one person is involved. So it involves brainstorming, decision making, and problem solving, talking to oneself, reflecting, weighing the pros and cons, etc. After that comes interpersonal communication where two people are involved. You have interviews, you have counseling sessions, counselor, counselee, interviewer, interviewee. And after that comes group communication. You have group discussions, meetings, etc. After that, you have public communication where you have public speeches. And then, you also have presentations. So especially the difference between group communication and public communication is in group communication, there are more than two people, but everybody is in the same vicinity and everybody gets equal opportunity to speak. Whereas in public communication, there's only one person that is the center of attention, that grabs the center of attention, and he's the one who is speaking. He takes the center stage, and rest others are just responding to one word verbal messages or through their body languages or through sounds and other movements, etc. So only one person takes center stage in public communication. There are a lot of people in the same vicinity, though they're in the same vicinity, they don't speak much. They don't give much of the message. Actually, much of the message is actually delivered by the sender. There's only one sender in public communication. That is, example is public speech. You can see political speeches, or you can see presentations. And in presentations also, in seminars also, there's only one guy who's presenting, and others are just they're passive communicators, passive responders. So after that comes your mass communication. So in mass communication, the sender and the receiver are not in the same vicinity, and there are lakhs and lakhs of receivers, actually lakhs, thousands, lakhs and crores of receivers. So they're not in the same vicinity. For that reason, you are using mass media channels, right? You have print and electronic media, newspaper, magazine in print media, and electronic media you have radio, TV, and internet. So that is one classification of communication that we already discussed. And the second classification of communication is again verbal communication and non-verbal communication. Okay. So what is verbal communication? Verbal communication talks about listening, speaking, reading, and writing. LSRW. So you, as a toddler, we first listened, and after listening, we learned how to speak. After learning how to speak, then we learned how to read. After learning how to read, then we learned how to write. So listening is the most important skill. So if you want to acquire something, if you want to learn a language, if you want to learn a subject, so listening is the most important skill that you have to hone. So that is verbal communication. And verbal communication also, you have formal and informal scenarios. In formal communication, the tone is different, and in informal communication the tone is again different. The gesturing, the tone, the respect that you give, all the things are considered in formal communication. And informal, so formal communication is something that we use especially as journalists, because we have to deliver the message respectfully. So that is about verbal communication. And in non-verbal communication, you have a lot of things again. You have your eye contact, you have gestures, hand gestures, head gestures, you have posture, erect posture, your sitting posture, your standing posture, and your facial expressions. So facial expressions means, you always have to have a smile, because your face is the index of your body. So always smile. If you smile, because we humans, we tend to imitate others, right? So if you smile, automatically the audience will also have a smiling face, and you can happily convey the message. So this is kinesics. And also you have something called chronomics, which talks about time management. Just by just following time, you're communicating a lot. And you have proxemics, which talks about the distance between the sender and the receiver, the physical distance. So based on the distance between the sender and the receiver, you can actually assess their relation. So after that, you have appearance and grooming, because first impression is the best impression. So your appearance, your hairstyle, how you have groomed yourself, your beard, your shirt, your pant, the coat, everything. Everything counts actually. So appearance and grooming. So that, and then comes, paralanguage. You have stress, you have intonation, etc. So these are the things that we have already discussed previously. So what is communication theory? So communication theory is actually the process of communication, how communication happens. Communication theory actually explains about the process of communication, the means of communication, how it happens. And as journalists, it is very important for you guys to hone your communication skills and also understand the process of communication, because journalists, they're not just good communicators, they also understand the communication process and they become good strategists. So we have to develop our strategy, communication strategy, brand strategy. For example, if you want to advertise a product, for example, so you have to develop an advertising communication strategy, advertisement communication strategy. So for that, you have to understand the process of communication. So once you understand the process of communication, then only you can design a communication model or a communication strategy for branding or for promoting a particular product. So that is communication theory for you. So when I talk about communication theory, we'll go to the next slide. Just will introduce what is communication. So the universal communication law says that, the universal communication law is given by SF Scudder. So in 1980, he states that all living entities, beings, creatures communicate. So they communicate through movement, sounds, reactions, physical changes, gestures, languages, etc. So communication happens between all living entities through different means. We need not just speak, it need not be a language. It can be anything. It can be a movement. It can be just a sound. It can be just a reaction. It can be a physical change. It can be a small gesture. It can be anything. So communication happens between any given living beings. It happens. So here, as a journalist, we should understand how it is happening and what we can do to make it more effective, efficient, and productive. Okay. So, but the story of modern mass communication began in the 15th century. So, in the history of journalism, you have something called Johannes Gutenberg. So, Johannes Gutenberg, he invented the movable printing press. So, with the invention of mobile printing press, the modern mass communication began. Okay, the printing has started. That's when you started getting books, journals, newspapers, etc. So in the 21st century, we have plethora of communication media, both print and electronic. So these are the terminologies that I want you guys to remember. This is for the examination sake. First one is communication events. So what are the different communication events? You have press conferences, you have product launch conferences. There are a lot of conferences, right? You have seminars, conferences, academic conferences, non-academic conferences. So there are a lot of conferences. All the conferences, all the meetings, all the seminars, all the symposia, they come under communication events, right? Processions, webinars, even this webinar that we are having, even this is a communication event. So all these symposia and all these all this dissemination of information in group, this is actually a communication event. No, I can call this, for example, this lecture that I'm delivering, this is a class, a lecture, which is a communication event. But here I'm doing public communication because I'm taking the center stage and you're just receiving the information and you're giving a very mild feedback. So then comes communication media. So what are the different media through which you're using to send the message? For example, the media that we are using to send the message here is internet. In internet, we are using Zoom call, right? So TV, you have radio, you have newspapers, you have magazines, you have internet, you have web media, etc. There are a lot of things that you can use, and also the communication technologies. So communication technologies, what type of technology are you using? So in internet media, I'm using Zoom technology. So similarly, phone technology, pager technology, email technology, video conferencing technology. You have Zoom, you have Google Meet, you have Microsoft Teams, you have Cisco WebEx, you have a lot of meeting apps actually. So communicate, because of this post-COVID scenario, now the learning is completely blended. So you have offline and you have online. So both modes are mixed now. So we have to adapt ourselves Now we have adopted, it's time for us to adapt ourselves. So that is very important. And communication professionals. Who are the communication professionals? The people who are sending the message, the people who are creating the message. So journalists, advertising and public relation personnel, camera crew, news readers, social media content developers, etc. So communication study is basically an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary social science actually. So communication, it encompasses management, it encompasses sociology, it encompasses psychology, it encompasses political science, because as a journalist, you should be aware of the current affairs. You have to be aware of the current scenarios, what is happening, political developments. You should be aware of the economics. You should be aware of the finance. You should be aware of everything, all the new technologies. You should be aware of everything. So we journalists, we have to be multifaceted, right? So it is very important for us to start developing our skill set from right now. Okay. So that is the reason why I'm adamant. I'm always motivating you guys to, to be multifaceted. Don't just confine yourself to one particular thing, but try to hone your knowledge in different dimensions, in different areas. So that is what I want to tell you here. So next slide, please. So in next slide, you have definition of communication. So every slide that I'm giving you is for examination's sake. So I request the team, the students to download this PPT and try to understand in depth of every concept that I'm explaining here. So communication definition in Oxford Dictionary defines communication as the transfer or conveying of meaning. So transfer of meaning and conveying of meaning. So we are trying to transfer meaning. So for example, I'm trying to transfer some information. What does that information contain? It contains a meaning. I'm doing a gesture. What does that gesture contain? It contains a meaning, right? Everything contains a meaning. So a message, it cannot be called as a message without a proper meaning. So Colin Cherry sees it as a transmission of stimuli. So when we talks about stimuli is not just about verbal message. It also talks about the non-verbal reactions. So even non-verbal expressions, they count. So whether it is a satire, whether you talk about your body language, sometimes your verbal message and your body language, they're not proportional. They're not proportional. Maybe it is a satire, right? So for Claude Shannon, communication is nothing but one mind affecting another. So a sender is actually, through his message, he's trying to affect the mind of the receiver, right? So theoretical views treat communication in different manners. So there are different theoretical views. I want you to understand each theoretical view. So the first theoretical view is mechanistic. So mechanistic view talks about perfect transaction or transmission of message from the sender to receiver. It just says that the message is perfectly transferred from the sender to the receiver. That is the mechanistic. And then you have psychological. Here, in psychological view, how the message impacted the receiver. So that is important. In mechanistic view, we don't talk about the impact of the message. We just talk about the transmission of the message. Whereas in psychological view, we actually talk about the impact of the message on the receiver. And then social constructionist. So social constructionist view actually talks about the truth and ideas. When the senders and receivers, when they're sharing information, they're sharing ideas. And through these ideas, they're creating different truths. So truth is beauty, beauty is truth. So the systemic view considers what happens as the message is interpreted and reinterpreted. So for example, when I start with the message, if I say, sun rises in the east. So then, someone explains why the sun rises in the east. And someone explains about the sun, someone explains about the solar system, someone explains about our Milky Way galaxy, someone explains about our universe, someone explains about the multiverse, someone explains about the black hole. So there are a lot of things, that people might explain, we talk about the movement of planets. So the meaning, once we start conveying the meaning is interpreted, reinterpreted, re-understood, added something, some other meaning is added to it, and slowly it evolves. The message, that the sender sends to the receiver, it evolves, and it is understood in a better way through discussions. So when I say the sun rises in the east, no, that is just a statement. Then, the receiver might ask, what is sun? Okay, what is earth? Why does it rise in the east? Why is Earth moving? Why is Earth rotating? Why is Earth revolving? What is moon? What are the stars? Slowly, we try to get the entire picture. So the meaning, is interpreted, reinterpreted, and redeveloped. So that is the systemic view. So it says that the meaning, the message is not static, but the message is dynamic. Okay. And then comes the critical view. So critical view is basically the source of power and oppression of individuals. So it talks about communication as a means for people who are oppressed. It is a source of power for the people who are oppressed. So mass communication is actually for the people who are oppressed, for the people who are discriminated, to give them upliftment through knowledge. So that is the main idea of mass communication. So, during our freedom struggle, newspapers were actually used to uplift people, right? So the main idea of journalism, it started was to uplift people, right? Next slide. So the 7 C's of communication. This is very important. It will definitely come for your exam. So what are the 7 C's? The first C is credibility. So for example, if you're sending a message, it has to have a credibility. It has to have a source. You have to cite, you have to give a reference to it. And it has to have proofs. When you're sending a message, it has to have proofs. Remember that. When you're writing a news report, it has to have proofs. So without proper sources, without authentic sources, without proper proofs, your message is not credible. Right? Next comes context. So the context changes. For example, if I'm explaining about the concept to an engineer, I explain it in a different way. If I'm explaining about a context, about a message, if I am explaining about a product to a doctor, I explain it in a different way. If I explain about the product to a lawyer, I explain it in a different way. So the message delivery changes according to the context. For example, if I'm talking to my friend, I use informal communication. If I'm talking to my professor, I use formal communication. And then comes content. So content is the key. How you develop the content, how you present the content. The content is very important. So content is the actual message. So nowadays, recently I gave a presentation on content writing. Content writing is the future, guys. I'm telling you. Previously, in previous class, I told you about creating a LinkedIn profile. Now, if you create your LinkedIn profile, and if you just search the job section, you'll understand that there are plethora of jobs for content writers. Every day, at least 20 to 30 new jobs for content writers, and most of them are work from home. So if you're good at English language, not only English language, if you're good at Telugu also, there are a lot of opportunities. Even political parties are hiring for content writers. Not just business; it's also political parties. Everybody. It's not just corporate that is hiring. Everybody wants a content writer. Now, even Andhra University has a content writer because you see the website, it is designed by the content writer. The newspapers are designed by the content writers, they are reporters. So content writers are everywhere, content is everywhere. Even the cell phone you use, the instructions how to use the cell phone is written by the content writer. The websites are designed by the content writer. The YouTube videos that you see, the script for them is written by the content writer. Everything, content writers demand is very high. So try to develop your language skills, especially in English language. As I've already told you, English is the lingua franca, language of global business. It is our official language, it is our link language, and it is an international language of repute. And then clarity. So after content comes clarity. So how, the message has to be clear, it should be easily understandable. So clarity is very important. Apart from brevity, clarity is also important. Brevity means brief. The message has to be brief because nowadays, people don't have time to read 400 to 500 pages. So you have to summarize everything into 1 or 2 pages and you have to give them. That's what people want. People don't have time. People don't have patience. People want everything in shortcuts, right? So brevity is also important, and continuity and consistency. So for example, if I give a statement, so there should be some coherence, and also I have to be consistent. I shouldn't contradict my own statement, right? And also the channels, The sixth C is the channel. What channel? What media channel? Is it print channel or print media channel or electronic media channel that I've used? And also the capability of audience. So the capability of audience, and whether the audience can understand your language, whether the audience can understand your information, whether the audience can comprehend your message. So whether they can actually decode your message. It is very important that they understand the message. So the capability of the audience should also be kept into mind. So their culture, the competence also has to be kept in mind. So because we write for the audience, so we have to keep them in mind and then write. It's not just showing our prowess or proficiency. It is about making them understand. It's not impressing the readers. It is giving an impression, a lasting impression on the readers. Next slide, please. So next slide talks about the communication process. So we have already discussed this, but I'll do a brief explanation about the communication process. So the communication has a source, that is the sender, and then the message, and then the message is encoded. So what is encoding again? So encoding is basically how the information is presented. So for example, when I start the class, I start with good morning, and then I end with take care, goodbye. So that's how there's a process of sending the message. So similarly, encoding is process of sending the message. It is encoding, what to speak first, what to speak next, what to speak at the end. No, it is actually how you want to transmit the message. So what are the levels of transmission? So that is what encoding talks about. And what you want to send first, what you want to send at the end, what you want to send in between, what you want to send next. No, this is encoding. So encoding is actually giving a proper structure to the message before you speak it, before you transmit it. So the sender, when I talk about the sender is the source, is the initiator of the communication process. So communication depends actually on his communication skill, his proficiency, also his knowledge level, his attitude, and also his culture, his social system, everything impacts the communication, that the message that he sends. So the sender's knowledge level, attitude, and communication skill play a major role. And then how he encodes it. If he encodes it properly, then only the sender will be able to understand. Next comes the message. So the message is the actual content which the sender wants to send. So the sender wants to send this content, this message through a given channel. So what is that channel? A channel is a vehicle through which the message is transmitted. The vehicle can be print media, the vehicle can be electronic media. So the vehicle can be radio, TV, internet. It can be anything, right? It can be newspaper, it can be magazine, it can be book. So that anything can be the vehicle. And then comes feedback. Feedback is the response of or acknowledgement of receiver of the communicator's message. So after receiving the sender's message, the receiver just doesn't keep quiet. He gives feedback, right? So giving feedback, whether he's understood or not, maybe non-verbal feedback, maybe verbal feedback, some sort of feedback is important, so that the receiver gets assurance, the sender gets assurance that the receiver has understood. Similarly, if the receiver is giving feedback, it is actually continuity in the message. So he's trying to get more knowledge, or maybe he's trying to convey that he has understood. So before the receiver gives feedback, first he has to receive. He receives it through his ears, he receives it through his eyes, he receives it through his nose, he receives it through his tongue, he receives the message through touch. So he's receiving the message through all the sense organs. So we are receiving the message not just through our ears, but now when the PPT is being presented, you are actually receiving the message through your eyes also, right? So you're using your sense organs, all your sense organs, to receive the message. And then after that, you decode it. What is decoding? You understand the message. In order to understand the message, there are three important factors. Again, you should have interest. Second thing is, you should have knowledge to understand. Third thing is, you should have communication skills. You should be able to comprehend what I'm trying to say. So similarly, in the previous class, we talked about eye contact. So a person who doesn't maintain eye contact, it shows that, he's not interested, maybe he's scared, maybe he's not confident, or maybe he's lying. So similarly, it is important that, a communication is complete. There are a lot of communication barriers, but it's important for the sender to make sure that the receiver understands. So for that only, this message is not just sent through verbal communication, it is also sent through non-verbal communication. So that is the reason why, smile and your eye contact, everything is important. So, we were talking about decoding. So decoding is basically understanding. So if you want the receiver to understand properly, then you have to take care of your non-verbal gestures also. And finally, you have noise. Noise is the interference actually, which affects the communication and recipient of message. For example, if I'm speaking to you and suddenly there's a marriage procession going on outside, so there's a lot of noise. So that is physical noise. The second thing is psychological noise. What is psychological noise? Maybe you're not interested, maybe you're depressed at this time you don't have mood to listen to the class. So there are a lot of psychological barriers. So you have physical barriers, you have psychological barriers. These are communication barriers. Noise is also known as communication barrier. Next slide, please. So we have started with the models of communication now. The first model of communication is Shannon and Weaver model of communication. So Shannon and Weaver model of communication is similar to the communication process model that we just discussed. So there's an information source, and then the message is transmitted through our vocal cords, and it goes through the channel. There's noise in the channel. The receiver receives it, and then the receiver tries to decode the message, and then he gives feedback. So, but in Shannon and Weaver model, the main thing here is the focus is on the noise. Noise refers to the disturbance. Noise is actually something that is, creating havoc in communication process, especially in when it comes to world communication, when it comes to communication between countries. It is because of this noise, that we recently have war between Russia and Ukraine. It is because of this noise that we have issue with Pakistan, Kashmir issue with Pakistan. It is because of this noise we have issues with China. It is because of this noise, every country has issue with another country. So it's because of the noise. The noise is not just physical or psychological disruption. It is disruption of the message, it's disruption of the decoding, it's disruption of disruption of how you send the message, how you encode it. So when there is disruption, when there is disturbance to the message, so definitely, there are bound to create some friction. It is bound to create some friction between the sender and the receiver. And definitely misunderstandings might take place. So it is very important for us to be aware of the noise. So what is right and what is wrong? Even if you see newspapers, you see that, one newspaper supports one political party, another newspaper supports another political party. So what is real news then? So news is something that comes from north, east, west, and south. News is something that is new. But the information that you're getting in one newspaper, the same information you're getting from one newspaper is different in another newspaper, is differently presented in another newspaper. So this is noise actually. This noise is because of the bias. So one newspaper has bias towards one political party, another newspaper has bias towards another political party. Even that is noise. Because of this noise, we are actually not able to retrieve or get the right information. So the truth, the actual truth is not being diffused correctly because of this noise. So this is Shannon and Weaver model, where you have information source, you have transmitter, you have channel, you have receiver, you have destination. And the channel, when the message is going through the channel, the noise is actually disrupting it. So that is something that you have to put in mind. This is Shannon and Weaver model, which gives more importance to noise. So even, for example, Shannon-Weaver model can be applied also to technology. So for example, you have an information source, then you use a mic. The mic is the transmitter actually. So the message converts into the message that you speak, the oral message that you speak converts into signal in the mic. The signal it travels through the channel. The message in the form of signal travels to the channel. There's some noise, and when by the time the receiver receives it, if there is, for example, connection disruption, if there is internet connection problems and all, so there is some disturbance, right? You don't receive the signal. The signal that you receive from the speaker is actually the signal which is converted again back into oral message, right? So but if there is connection problems, if there is another problem, then there is disruptions, and you don't clearly get the message, right? And finally it reaches the destination. So Shannon and Weaver model can be applied to technology. So for example, if I put a mic here and speak, my voice, the oral message is transmitted, the message is transmitted into signal, electric signal. The electric signal travels through the wire, through the phone, through as a radio signal or as an electric signal, it travels, and then it reaches the receiver's phone or receiver's laptop. If there is a connection problem, then there is some noise, right? And the message gets to the destination with the noise actually. So here our main idea in Shannon Weaver model, why they are focusing on noise, is to eliminate noise. So noise is in different forms actually. Noise is just not technical disturbance. Noise is not just not connection disturbance. Noise is barrier. It is also bias. It is also lack of communication proficiency. For example, I'm speaking in English. If the receiver has no proficiency in English, has zero proficiency in English, is not able to comprehend what I'm saying, then that is also noise. For example, if I'm talking about transmission, if the receiver doesn't understand what transmission is, if the receiver doesn't have knowledge about what a transmitter is, what transmission is, then that is noise, right? So you have, in this theory, you have some concepts that you have to remember. So the first concept is information. So the information is measure of one's freedom of choice when one selects a message. So for example, I'm selecting a message. So how much freedom of choice I'm being given to send a message completely. So for example, I'm a representative of one news channel. The news channel is supporting the chief minister or prime minister. So can I talk negatively about the chief minister or prime minister? Can I talk about the demerits of chief minister and prime minister? If a new media channel or if a news channel who is supporting the chief minister and prime minister is interviewing me, I cannot put the chief minister or prime minister in bad light, right? So my freedom of speech, my freedom of choice of message is restricted. So basically information is actually talks about the measure of one's freedom of choice when one selects a message. So for example, you're in the class, maybe you're not interested in the class. You want to say that, sir, I'm not interested in the class. I want to quit the class. But because this is class and you have to listen. So your freedom to choose the message is restricted. Similarly, if you dislike something, if you dislike someone, if you dislike, or if you don't want something, the freedom to choose a message depends on how close you are to the person, and how much the person might affect you, and the pressure, the political pressure, the social pressure, the academic pressure. So all these factors play a major role in you choosing the message. How much message you want to disseminate, whether you want to disseminate the entire message completely without any omissions, or you want omissions, you want to cut it, you want to present it in a more diplomatic way. So that is again information in Shannon-Weaver model. And the other concept in Shannon-Weaver model is entropy. So entropy is basically the measure of uncertainty in a system. So for example, as a receiver, you may not know what I will be speaking as a sender, what message I'll be giving you as a sender. So that is entropy. So for example, if the entropy is less, it means that the receiver is able to predict what the sender is sending. If the entropy is more, then the uncertainty is more, then it means that the receiver is not able to predict what the sender might send. So that is entropy. And then redundancy. Redundancy means repetitions. So repetitions, why repetitions are important? Because if you repeat a message again and again and again and again and again, if you listen to a lecture again and again and again, why I am actually putting this lecture, why I'm actually recording this lecture, why I'm actually transmitting it onto YouTube live stream is because if you listen to it again and again and again, there are chances for the noise to reduce and there are chances for you to understand the message more effectively. So that is redundancy concept. And then you have channel capacity concept. So channel capacity concept actually talks about what is the capacity of the channel, how much capacity, what is the capacity of Zoom, what is the capacity of your cell phone, how much battery capacity it has, what are the features it has, what are the features of Zoom, can I share the screen, can I share the PPT, can I do a YouTube live stream, can I do something else, can I play a video, can I sing a song, what are the features that are being offered. So that is channel capacity. So based on the channel capacity, I will tame my lecture. Okay. So that is channel capacity. In Shannon and Weaver model, you have information concept, you have entropy concept, you have redundancy concept, and finally you have channel capacity concept. So that is Shannon and Weaver model. And next comes Laswell's model. Next slide. So Harold D. Laswell in 1948, he presented a strictly verbal model. Here in Laswell's model is completely devoid of body language and non-verbal cues. Okay, it is strictly a verbal model. Verbal model, as I've already told you, talks about listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay, so listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So that is Harold D. Laswell's model actually. So Harold D. Laswell's model only encompasses verbal communication. He says, who says what, in which channel, to whom, with what effect. In our journalism, we have 5 W's and 1 H: what, where, when, why, who, and how. So similarly, Laswell's model, it actually came from the Laswell's model actually. Laswell's model is the invoker or initiator of this. Laswell's model says who says what. Who means the sender. Says what. What means the message. In which channel means channel. To whom means the receiver. With what effect? What is the impact of the message and what is the feedback? So who says what, in which channel, to whom, with what effect? So Laswell stated that a convenient way to describe an act of communication is to answer these questions. Who says? Who is the sender? What? What is the message? Which channel? What is the channel being used? To whom? Who is the sender? With what effect? What is the impact? And the feedback. So this is Laswell's model of communication. So it's very important that in Laswell's model of communication, we take into account speaking, reading, and writing also. So when we talk about speaking, there are different types of speaking. Again, public speaking, you have presentation, you have one-on-one speaking, you have panel speaking. There are a lot of speakings that we do. So it's very important, when we tone or we hone our speaking skills. Similarly, reading skills. You have a lot of reading skills. You have skimming, you have scanning, you have intensive reading, you have extensive reading, you have critical reading, and you have writing skills. In writing, you have writing a content, writing an email, writing a resume. There are a lot of writings that we do on a day-to-day basis, like writing a script, etc. So, and most importantly, listening. Listening is very important tool. Listening is very important for a receiver. If a receiver listens properly, listening is done not just through your ears. Listening is also done through your eyes. Listening is also done through your nose. For example, if your mom is cooking, you're listening it through your nose. You know what is being cooked. You taste whether the salt is right or not, the amount of salt is right or not. Through taste, you can say. So you're listening through your tongue. You listen through your touch. For example, if you want to see, for example, if your mother is sick, if you want to see the temperature, you touch her forehead, right, with your palm, with your hand, and then you see the temperature. So you're listening through different sense organs actually. So that is very important. So listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and owning them, everything is important. Writing a report, understanding how to write a report. Report writing is, in journalism, you talk about inverse pyramid. In inverse pyramid, the first paragraph talks about all the five W's and one H. And the second paragraphs are just extensions. They are additional information. So this is Laswell's model of communication. Next slide, please. So this is the final slide. This is Burlers' model of communication. So Burlers' model of communication doesn't have feedback, as you can see. It just has SMCR, sender, message, channel, receiver, or source, message, channel, receiver. Sender or source, both are same. So here, if you see properly, you have under sender or under source, you have communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system, and culture. And under receiver, you have communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system, and culture. So for a sender to send the message and for the receiver to understand the message, both of them need communication skills. Both of them should speak the same language. For example, if I speak English and if you don't understand English, what is the point of me delivering the lecture in English? Right? So we should share same language. We should have knowledge on one particular language, on a common language. We must share a common language and we must have proficiency in that language. That is communication skills. And next comes attitude. Attitude is interest. So for example, the sender has to have interest to send the message. Similarly, the receiver has to have interest to receive the message. So interest also plays a major role in overcoming, especially in overcoming barriers. And knowledge. So for example, if I'm talking about rocket science, you should also have basic knowledge about rocket science. If I'm actually talking about, United Nations organization, you should have basic knowledge about United Nations organization. Otherwise, you won't understand the conversation. You won't be able to comprehend the conversation. You won't be able to decode what I'm trying to say. You won't be able to read between the lines, right? I always repeat this again and again and again. Kagitambu kalgina aksharal chadivinanta dharini chedrudaguna aksharambunandu ardambu neriguchu chadivinattivade chedrudaguna. So a person who reads between the lines, then only he can become clever. Just by just reading the sentence, you won't become clever, right? So knowledge is, reading between the lines, understanding the inner tones, understanding the bodily cues, everything is knowledge. And understanding the jargons, understanding the situation, understanding the concept, understanding the product, understanding the political scenario, everything is knowledge. So for example, if I'm talking about elections in Uttar Pradesh or elections in Andhra Pradesh, elections in Telangana, you should understand what the content is, which parties are contending, who are the people, who are the major people, who is the CM candidate. You should have basic knowledge, in order to, or if you want to be able to have a conversation with me, we should share common knowledge, right? For example, if I'm talking about, a cell phone, if I'm talking about 5G, for example, you should have basic knowledge about 5G so that, you can have a conversation with. Similarly, social system and culture. So social system is, if we come from the same social system, then the communication becomes easy. So for example, in India, we address our teachers as professors or sir. Professor Murthy sir, Professor Bobby sir, Professor Ramakrishna sir. So Dr. Challa, Krishnaveer Abhishek sir. We say like that. But when I was in Sweden, I called, my professor's name was Anders Hulten. I used to call him Professor Anders sir. He told me, sir, he told me not to call him sir, because sir is generally used when a person is given knighthood by the Queen of England. So don't use sir, please call me Anders. So it is a cultural difference for me, there's a cultural bias, it's a culture shock for me. So, calling my professor by his name is difficult, right? In India, we are used to, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Para Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. So you call your teacher as sir and your teacher as ma'am. You don't call them by their names, right? But in Europe, in US, you call them by their names. So definitely there are cultural barriers, social system barriers. My professor, he used to come in shorts to the class. He used to wear shorts and come to the class. In class, we used to have burgers and all. So the class was, more like it gave more like a theater experience actually. It was good actually because I could emotionally connect with the teacher, I could emotionally connect with the subject, but that was an advantage. But at the same time, in India, we have a ritual in class, that whenever a teacher comes, you stand up, you respect the teacher. There are a lot of rituals that we follow, but there, it's completely devoid of all this. So, the communication also depends upon the social system and culture. For example, in even in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, one word in Andhra Pradesh might be, it can be a negative word in Telangana, or the same word in Telangana can be a negative word in Andhra Pradesh, right? It can be a curse word in Andhra Pradesh. Similarly, in Telangana, people don't say garu much. In Andhra Pradesh, we say garu. So we get offended easily in Telangana because people are not using garu, right? So this is there. These cultural and social barriers are always there. You know, social barriers again, it economic and social. So when you come from a very middle class family, your style of messaging, your style of sending the message is different. When you're coming from rich or poor classes, your style of sending the message is different, right? So it's like that. And then in channel, you when you receive the message, you receive the message by seeing, by hearing, by touching, by smelling, and by tasting. So, and also in the message, you have elements of the message, you have content, you have treatment, you have code and structure. What are these? So, elements of message are basically our content, treatment. How you treat the message is basically, what is the tone, whether it is aggressive tone, whether it is passive tone, how your tone is, authoritative tone, passive aggressive tone, assertive tone. That is treatment. And content is another element. How you send the content, what is the content, and what are the structure, what is the structure, how you have structured it. We talk about encoding, so how you have structured the message. And then code, what type of code you have used, whether you have used a verbal code, whether it's a verbal message or non-verbal code, a non-verbal message. Finally, elements, what are the different elements that you have added? Bodily elements, eye contact, smile, your gestures, how you send the message, and the message, actual message, what type of jargons you have used. All these elements come under, all these aspects come under elements of the message. So most importantly, these are the models of communication that you have to explain, in your exam scenario. These are very easy. If you just listen to today's class again and again, just practice what I've discussed today, you can easily crack it. It's not much difficult. And remember that, listening and speaking are active skills, because your mind has to be active. Even, if your mind goes off for a few seconds, you will lose the message while listening and speaking. You'll stutter and stammer while speaking, and you will just lose the coherence and flow while listening. And reading and writing are passive skills. Why they are passive communication skills? Because if you're reading something and suddenly your brain goes haywire, you can bring it back and again you can start reading, right? So that is the reason why, it is important for us to listen and speak, to be more focused, more attentive, and give utmost concentration when we are listening and speaking. So this is very important for a journalist, because you're all future journalists or future journalism teachers. So it is very important for you to understand all these theories of communication. And as journalists, I see that journalists are always serious. Try to incorporate smile, smile, an everlasting smile. A smile can bring you near to me. Don't tear. Well, let me find you, God, 'cause that would bring a tear to me. This world has lost its glory. Let's start a brand new story now. My love, you think that I don't even mean a single word I say. It's only words, and words are all I have to take your heart away. So, journalists, we only have words to take the hearts of our audience. So, use words accurately, use words sparsely, use words with utmost attention and concentration. So, use the right words. That is very important. And also be confident, be smart. Your goals have to be smart, specific, measurable, action oriented, and realistic. And analyze your strengths. What are your strengths? Capitalize on your strengths. What are your weaknesses? Work on your weaknesses. What are your opportunities? Grab different opportunities. As I've told you, LinkedIn is the best platform. And threats is basically your competition. So when I talk about your weakness, for example, if English language is your weakness, work on improving your language skill. Surround yourself with English language. Acquire the language. If you acquire something, you remember it forever. If you learn something, you forget it immediately. So acquire it, start acquiring language. Read newspapers. As journalists, the main advantage that we have is we have a very dynamic textbook, that is newspaper. Our newspaper, the daily newspaper that we get every day, is our textbook. Read it completely. Be it an English newspaper, be it a Telugu newspaper, read it completely. Even Hindi newspaper, because the first thing I do in the morning, early morning when I get up, is read the newspaper from first page to last page completely. With this, you will try to you can easily understand what's the colloquial language of communication that is being used. A lot of opportunities, guys. So grab them, be confident, and always remember Rabindranath Tagore's saying, where the mind is without fear is high, where knowledge is free, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way, where the words come out from the depth of truth. So remember all this. So remember this, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. So these sayings, you have to remember, we have a lot of, we have our national anthem, we have our pledge and all. But for us, for us journalists, the pledge has to be. Now, I want you guys to write it down again. I'll say it again. Write it down. And from next class onwards, I want everybody to take this pledge before starting the class. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Where the mind is without fear and head is held high. Where knowledge is free. Where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way. Where the words come out from the depth of truth. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. I want you to practice this today. And from next class onwards, we'll try to take this pledge before starting the class. Okay. So be confident, be fearless, and try to create a stress-free environment around. And try to connect with the subject. You as journalists, you have to be aware. Awareness is very important, and emotionally intelligent. Sympathize. Okay, remember, concern, consideration, and concentration. All these three skills are very important. So this is your first class. Actually, we have almost completed unit 1 in this class. So I've explained all the components of unit 1, almost all the components of unit 1. And tomorrow we'll be discussing unit 2. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your patient listening. And this video, this lecture is actually will be streamed on YouTube. It is streamed on YouTube. I will be sharing the link. You can go through it again and again and again till you have understood it. Okay. So these are the different models of communication. Thank you, guys. Take care. Have a great day. See you.